The day they met, Prince Oscar and his loyal attendant Lazar were journeying to find the Witch of the Azure Moon to lift Oscar's curse. It is rumored that if they pass her tower challenges, she will grant them a wish. Moments later, the duo arrives at the Azure Tower. Inside the tower, Oscar faces the first challenge, a tablet surrounded by snakes. Seeing this, Lazar starts panicking, fearing the snakes are venomous, but Oscar calmly assures him they're beta snakes. Then, the tablet presents a mathematical equation, but Oscar confidently solves it. Meanwhile, at the top of the Azure Tower, the Witch of the Azure Moon, Tanasha and her attendant Lathla are seen fooling around. Tanasha observes that challengers have reached the tower after a long break, noting their rapid progress compared to a previous contender who fled the first floor. Back with Oscar, he and Lazar face a series of trials. Lazar continues to urge retreat, but Oscar presses forward. They soon encounter a room with Gorgon statues, which Lazar fears will come to life. Surprisingly, his fears are confirmed as the statues animate and start attacking them, but Oscar dodges their charges and defeats them effortlessly, further impressing Tanasha, who watches from above like a simp in love. As Oscar advances, a magical circle appears, but the ground beneath them cracks, separating him from Lazar. Despite Oscar's efforts to save him, Lazar falls into the chasm, urging Oscar to continue without him. He soon reaches a storage-like room, which leads him to the tower's summit, where Tanasha awaits. Tanasha welcomes Oscar warmly, offering him tea and introducing herself, and Oscar is surprised by her youthful appearance. She reassures Oscar that Lazar is safe, merely unconscious below, and tries to ease his worry. Tanasha then asks for the reason for his mission, and Oscar finally reveals his identity and the curse placed on him by the Witch of Silence when he was a child. It turns out that the curse prevents his family from bearing children, as any woman they clap will die. He suspects it's tied to his mother's early death after his birth. Despite extensive research, he's found no solution, leading him to Tanasha, and Tanasha examines it closely. She reveals that what Oscar calls a curse is actually a powerful blessing, cast by the formidable Witch of Silence. Normal humans cannot bear Oscar's child without perishing. Tanasha suggests finding a woman capable of withstanding the blessing's effects, but before she can elaborate, Oscar proposes that her juicy jugs could be the solution, as a witch powerful enough to withstand his sausage. Shocked by this proposal, Tanasha hesitates, but Oscar presses her, suggesting that his wish will be that she leaves the tower and become his wife, arguing that her power makes her the ideal candidate. Despite this, Tanasha firmly refuses, giving him a ton of excuses to not do it. However, Oscar remains persistent and keeps trying to rizz her up. This makes Tanasha frustrated, and she threatens to alter his memory, but Oscar reveals a holy sword with full magic resistance, neutralizing her threat. Stunned by the sword's presence, Tanasha backs off. After reflexing for a bit, Oscar makes his wish. He requests her to live with him for a year, and if in that time she doesn't fall in love with him, she will be free to leave. A few moments later, Oscar reunites with a now-awake Lazar outside the tower. Confused about what just happened, Lazar asks about Tanasha, and Oscar introduces her as the witch's disciple who will help break his curse. With this, the trio sets off for Pharsis, with Oscar teasing Tanasha that she can make the kingdom her home if she changes her mind. But Tanasha firmly denies this, determined to maintain her independence. A few days later, Oscar and Tanasha arrive at the Pharsis capital, and Tanasha casts a magical protection spell on Oscar, ensuring no physical or magical attacks can harm him as long as she's alive. Oscar jokingly calls it cheating, and Tanasha claims that he's sleeping with a literal witch, but warns him to stay cautious of poison or psychological attacks, which her spell can't block. On the other hand, Tanasha chats with Lazar, Oscar's attendant, about the kingdom's succession issues. Lazar explains that 15 years ago, children in the kingdom, including Oscar's cousins, mysteriously vanished, leaving Oscar as the sole heir to manage everything. This burdens him with immense responsibility to handle the Empire's business, causing Tanasha to feel slightly bad for him. At the palace, a mage named Sylvia attempts to cast a spell to levitate a chandelier but loses control, causing it to plummet like Tesla stocks. When Tanasha notices this insanity, she effortlessly uses magic to set it down safely, astonishing onlookers with her precise, incantation-free spellcasting. As Tanasha and Lazar head out, they hear commotion outside and spot two figures sparring, General Al and Meridina. Lazar is immediately impressed by Al's strength, but claims Oscar surpasses him. Meanwhile, Tanasha reflects on Oscar's tower conquest and realizes that his prowess makes sense and leaves the scene. A few moments later, Tanasha spars with General Al herself, impressing him with her combat skills. Al suggests she join their ranks, but Tanasha politely declines. But as soon as she departs, her familiar Lathla appears on a tree, delighted to see Tanasha enjoying herself in Pharsis. Tanasha admits she's having fun, though not fully settled, and asks why Lathla is there. But before Lathla can explain, the scene shifts to Oscar noticing Tanasha's torn attire, suggesting she's gearing up for a fight. When he asks where she's going, Tanasha vaguely says she'll return in a few days. But when Oscar presses her for more information like a toxic boyfriend, she reveals she's heading to the magical lake to investigate a surge in magical energy, suspecting demonic beasts. Hearing this, Oscar insists on joining, citing the lake's location within Pharsis jurisdiction. Tanasha objects immediately, unwilling to protect his soldiers, but Oscar persists, promising to bring troops and handle them. With no other options, Tanasha agrees to wait for him to get his balls in check. At the magical lake, two figures, Vals and an unnamed woman, plot to lure Tanasha by generating magical energy. knowing she will come to investigate. Back in Pharsis, Oscar assembles his team, including Sylvia, who spots a small dragon perched on Tinasha's shoulder. Excited, Sylvia introduces herself but startles when the dragon snaps at her. Tinasha immediately apologizes, explaining it's not friendly, and tells Oscar she'd planned to ride the dragon alone. But Oscar is skeptical of its size and orders his troops to follow Tinasha's commands and prepares for the unknown. As they depart, Tinasha hears a distant voice, which triggers memories of loss and abandonment, but Oscar snaps her out of it, and they teleport to Druza Fortress near the magical lake. At the location, Tinasha briefs the group about its history. It turns out that 70 years ago, Druza, a neighboring kingdom, attacked Pharsis but was repelled. In retaliation, Druza unleashed a giant beast, which spiraled out of control, devastating allies and enemies alike. Tinasha, as the Witch of the Azure Moon, sealed it in the lake, but its poisonous aura turned the area into a wasteland. She somehow contained it to protect the region, knowing a prolonged fight would have worsened the situation. Stunned to hear this, Oscar asks if the beast remains sealed, and Tinasha confirms it's still there. Suddenly, Tinasha senses a presence nearby and demands that it reveal itself. Soon, a mage from Druza emerges, recognizing Tinasha from OnlyFans, as if he were a regular subscriber. Tinasha claims that the mage had aged since she last saw him as a child, accusing him of acting like his master, whom she defeated. As they chat, the mage begs not to fight, knowing he can't match her, but warns that if they don't leave, he'll target one of them. He then launches magical arrows at Oscar, who blocks some, but others hit his soldiers. Tinasha tries to strike the mage, but he vanishes like a fart. As the crew stands confused, Tinasha reveals he's a Druza mage connected to the beast's past. On the other hand, Sylvia helps an injured soldier with basic healing magic and asks if the Druza mage is a witch. Tinasha avoids the question and instead asks Oscar if he used his holy sword, but Oscar shrugs, saying no attack can hurt him with her protection. As the group processes Tinasha's witch identity, she apologizes for hiding it. Meanwhile, Sylvia is undeterred and she tries to touch her, but Tinasha recoils, warning that witches inspire fear, which is a common reaction. She then tells Oscar to rally his troops while she pursues the mage alone. Oscar tries to grab her, demanding that he come along, but Tinasha refuses, reminding him of their magical bond. She will always return to him and won't die before him. Reluctantly, Oscar lets her go, so Tinasha climbs on the dragon and flies off. At the lake, the Druza mage orders his men to break the beast's seal, but they hesitate, fearing Tinasha's wrath. Just then, she appears and swiftly eliminates everyone except one. Mocking the survivor, she offers to help break the seal, intending to destroy the beast once freed. Suddenly, the seal shatters, unleashing a wolf-like magical beast. Facing it after 70 years, Tinasha dodges its attack and unleashes a lightning bolt, but the beast shrugs it off like a lazy Labrador. So, she lands a powerful blast, only for the beast to heal itself. Despite this, Tinasha binds it with wind magic and delivers a devastating spell, but the beast breaks free and manages to attack her. However, without sustaining much damage, she soon manages to obliterate the beast. Back at Druza Fortress, Oscar waits anxiously for his side piece. When Tinasha finally returns on her dragon, Oscar summons mages to heal her. Sylvia later reports that Tinasha only sustained a few minor wounds because she healed all the major injuries, surprising Oscar as his side piece was in a battered condition. He then enters her room to check, catching her partially undressed.
Yeah, boy.
Tinasha shoos him out like a dog. Once dressed, she confirms she healed herself due to severe injuries and assures Oscar she's fine. When he asks about the beast, she casually calls it a piece of cake. With this, Oscar thanks her, knowing they couldn't have defeated the beast without her. But Tinasha brushes it off, saying it was easy for a witch. Following day, Tinasha is chatting with her familiar Lathla when Sylvia arrives at the scene. She offers to help cut Tinasha's hair, and they eventually engage in a stupid conversation. Tinasha asks if Sylvia fears her as a witch, given their fearsome reputation for destroying nations overnight. Sylvia admits she's heard such tales, but finds Tinasha different, softening her view of witches. When she asks if Tinasha fears anything, the juicy witch reflects, saying she once felt overwhelmed but no longer does, because she has been alive for thousands of years. However, Tinasha admits that Oscar's unpredictable behavior unsettles her, as he treats her like a girl for hire. Hearing this, Sylvia chuckles, noting she has sensed the same vibe from him. A few moments later, Oscar takes Tinasha to meet his father, King Kevin, announcing his intent to marry her. Tinasha firmly rejects this, reminding him she's not interested in human sausage. Hearing this, Kevin asks if she can break Oscar's curse, which prevents his family from bearing children without fatal consequences. Tinasha claims that she's making progress, though it was challenging initially. Meanwhile, at the magical lake, Vals and his ally Morel discuss Tinasha's recent battle with the magical beast. Vals reveals they obtained something valuable due to her injuries. Just then, a mysterious man interrupts and sticks his flagpole on their plan. So Vals taunts him, saying Tinasha has been searching for him, but the man dismisses it, claiming she'll be pleased to see him. When Vals calls him arrogant, the man grows hostile, accusing Vals of scheming. In response, Vals insists he's merely observing future events to avert disasters, but the man attacks him, killing him and vowing to protect a mysterious girl, hinting at a deeper connection. Back in Pharsis, Oscar and Lazar venture into the wild forest without Tinasha's knowledge, investigating reports of villagers' bodies found without their innards. Lazar warns Oscar that Tinasha will be furious, but Oscar, feeling stifled by her protectiveness, presses on, confident that his holy sword and Tinasha's protection spell will keep him safe. In the forest, they encounter strange plants, and when Lazar is inspecting one, he is suddenly attacked by vines. Oscar quickly intervenes, but a larger plant releases a gas cloud. Suspecting poison like in 1945, Oscar shields Lazar, but another gas burst knocks him unconscious. As Oscar rushes to help, a woman's voice questions their presence, and a new figure emerges, halting the attack. A few moments later, Lazar wakes up in a room, tended by Oscar, who assures him he's safe thanks to their rescuer. Just then, the woman introduces herself as Lucrezia, the witch of the Forbidden Forest. Shocked to see another witch, Lazar starts getting paranoid, but when Lucrezia notices their connection to Tanasha, she reveals she's known her since Tanasha became a witch. When she finds out that Tanasha is Oscar's protector and is not in her tower, Lucrezia is shocked that Oscar has conquered that witch's melons. She playfully asks what wish he made, and Lazar blurts out that Oscar wants to marry Tanasha. Hearing this, Lucrezia laughs, saying it's a tough goal since Tanasha, a spirit sorceress, remains emotionally distant to preserve her purity. However, she gets interested and offers Oscar a medicine to help his sausage rise, but her tone turns mischievous. When Oscar instinctively grips his sword, Lucrezia teases that she doesn't fight and apologizes for startling him. Seeing this, Lazar urges Oscar to leave and aid the villagers, and Oscar agrees, suspecting the plants are behind the attacks. Returning to Pharsis, Tanasha confronts Oscar and Lazar, asking if they faced trouble in her absence. However, Lazar assures her they handled it, keeping their forest adventure quiet. The next morning, Tanasha checks on Oscar, asking if he slept well. He confirms he did, but suddenly sees a second Tanasha beside her, disorienting him. Brushing it off, he teases why she's so concerned about his sleep. Tanasha insists she just wants him rested for his duties and leaves. A few moments later, Tanasha catches Lazar with books and asks if Oscar's sleeping normally. Lazar confirms he's not staying up late, but Tanasha gets suspicious and asks if Oscar has a lover, sensing his life force fluctuating. But Lazar denies it, jokingly asking if she's jealous. This makes the witch slightly flustered, and she quickly shuts him down. Later, Tanasha tells Sylvia and others that Oscar might have a lover, citing his fluctuating life force and a strange scent on him. The group doubts it, as they haven't noticed any scent, and Oscar doesn't seem romantically inclined. But Tanasha gets frustrated, as she is the only one who can detect it, so she storms off and confronts Oscar about his infidelity. She demands to know why he didn't tell her about meeting Lucrezia. Oscar tells her it was equivalent to a Tinder date, but Tanasha warns that Lucrezia cast a spell on him. While her protection stops physical and magical attacks, psychological spells like Lucrezia's can instantly unalive people. Her spell forces Oscar to dream of a lover, draining his life until he dies within a week. Sensing the spell's twisted aura, Tanasha vows to break it that very night. That evening, Tanasha sits by Oscar's bedside as he sleeps, attempting to lift the spell. In his dream, Oscar sees a woman and hears a voice from a room. When he goes inside, he finds Tanasha and embraces her, but suddenly chokes her, urged by a voice to exterminate. Despite resisting, he can't stop, and he successfully eliminates the Tanasha in his dream. Waking in a panic, Oscar finds Tanasha beside him with her magical milk containers. She explains she redirected the spell's energy, restoring his life force, but it required him to unalive her in the dream. Devastated, Oscar begs her never to make him do that again. But this confuses Tanasha even more, and she points out that his holy sword could eliminate her for real. However, the loser simp insists he'd never want to eliminate those juicy knockers. Just as he reaches for her juggernauts, Tanasha leaves the room, telling him to get proper rest. On the other hand, Tanasha confronts Lucrezia, furious about the spell she cast on Oscar's ding-dong. Lucrezia claims she didn't expect Tanasha to push Oscar to such extremes, calling it the easiest way to break it. But Tanasha is aware of their contract and accuses her of endangering Oscar. Lucrezia teases about Oscar's reaction, asking if Tanasha would give him up. Tanasha briefly agrees but retracts, saying she's too invested in this relationship, especially with the Witch of Silence's curse looming. Hearing this, Lucrezia reveals she extracted Oscar's blood during their encounter, offering it to help break the curse. Annoyed by this response, Tanasha notes Lucrezia's manipulative tactics and tells her to shut her trap. The next day, while Oscar is changing in his room, he calls Tanasha over. She hesitates to speak, but he pulls her onto the bed. He then asks her for forgiveness, and Tanasha apologizes too, and with this, they share an interspecies spicy moment. The next day, Prince Oscar is in a Pharsis training field, dominating a sparring match. He swiftly defeats an opponent with his holy sword called Acacia and challenges others to step up. Eager to test his resiliency, General Al volunteers, but Oscar disarms him like a little dork, sending his sword flying across the field. Spotting Tanasha observing from the sidelines, Oscar calls her out, teasing her to join the fray and use her magic. But Tanasha hesitates as her mind starts racing. Seeing Oscar's raw power makes her wonder if he could truly overpower a witch like her. Despite this, Tanasha hesitantly steps forward and their duel begins. She unleashes a flurry of magical bolts, which Oscar dodges with uncanny precision. However, she escalates the attacks, casting an invisible binding spell to trap him. But Oscar senses it and manages to break free in an instant. Impressed by his ability, Tanasha smiles and calls off the fight, admitting her magic won't work on his rock-solid sausage today. After the sparring session, she sits down with Oscar and heals some minor bruises on his body. As they talk, he jokingly calls her Magic Weak, asking if she held back. But Tanasha retorts that complex spells take time, and she didn't want to waste her energy in a stupid sparring match. Realizing the chick is feeling inferior, Oscar insists he'd never want to eliminate her, but Tanasha playfully makes fun of him. However, when Oscar suggests marriage would solve his curse, a magical blessing that kills any woman bearing his child, Tanasha firmly rejects him and storms off. A few hours later, King Kevin summons Oscar to his quarters and hands over a letter from a northern kingdom. It turns out that a visitor named Kaga is demanding to meet Tanasha, the Witch of the Azure Moon. Oscar is baffled because no one knew that Tanasha was in the Pharsis kingdom, and he confronts the man. Upon inquiry, Kagar insists he's heard about a strange witch's presence there, but Oscar denies any witch's involvement in his kingdom, wanting to know what Kagar really wants. On the other hand, Tanasha searches for Oscar when a maid, Meryl, introduces herself. Sensing Meryl's hidden agenda, Tanasha tells her to keep her hormones in check and dismisses her, but stays vigilant. Later, she meets Lucretia, the Witch of the Forbidden Forest, and questions her about Oscar's training. Lucretia warns that making Oscar too powerful could threaten the Council of Witches, and urges her to maintain neutrality. Hearing this, Tanasha finally admits that she has no idea why she sparred with him, but wants someone strong enough to stop her if she ever loses control, hinting at a past obsession with finding a mysterious figure. Just at that moment, Oscar interrupts, relaying Kagar's request. Soon, Tanasha meets Kagar, who begs her to share magical knowledge to advance his kingdom's technology. But the witch with enormous jugs refuses, citing her role as Oscar's protector. She also mentions how Kagar failed to climb her Azure Tower, which has severely impacted his aura debt. So, with a flick of magic, she expels him. Outside, a furious Kagar vows to separate Oscar and Tanasha, just when he spots Meridina and comes up with an idea. Back at the palace, Tanasha discusses a town named Kushkal, a northern region radiating magical energy similar to the magical lake, with Lucretia. Lucretia denies specifics but confirms that odd things are happening in that town. Suddenly, Meridina lunges at Tanasha, accusing her of manipulating human hearts. Tanasha, stung by the familiar accusation, nearly blocks the strike, but Al grabs Meridina's sword. Just then, Oscar arrives at the scene and demands to know what the frog is going on. Meridina insists Tanasha leave, but Lucretia reveals she's under mind control. Hearing this, Oscar asks Lucretia for help, and she frees Meridina, boasting about her expensive services. Feeling bad for her, Oscar asks Tanasha when she last cried, but the witch deflects the question, as she is unable to recall her own memories. That night, Tanasha lies in bed, still shaken from earlier events. When Oscar shows up at the Azure Tower, he asks why she called him. Tanasha explains she sent her familiar to scout Kush and offers to train him every day, promising she won't die. Then, without warning, she lunges at him, but Oscar counters like a G, and their sparring begins. Over the next few days, Tanasha pushes him harder and harder, forcing him to tap into his hidden magical potential. She tells him Akoshia can unlock these powers, but only if he learns to sense the magical flow. In one session, she surrounds herself with flames, daring him to notice what's happening. At first, Oscar's blind to it, but eventually he spots a magical circle and strikes it, putting out the fire. Seeing this, Tanasha claps for him, clearly impressed by his skills, but then claims it's time to face real human opponents. A few moments later, a bunch of intruders crash into the tower. Tanasha smiles and tells them they'll have to defeat Oscar to get through. She promises no one will die, letting him fight without holding back. Oscar tears through them like a paid escort, leaving Tanasha staring in awe. He asks if he's ready to face her again, but Tanasha sidesteps the question, keeping the mystery alive. Just then, her cat familiar returns, bringing news from Kushkel. In Pharsis, Tanasha briefs Oscar and Lazar, explaining that Kushkel hosts at least 200 mages, 10 times more than a typical nation. Naturally, Oscar suspects they are preparing for war and asks about Kushkel's king. Tanasha confirms there is a new ruler instead of the old domain lord, but she doesn't have many details. Meanwhile, a guard reports that General Todd has died from previous injuries, leaving a void for Oscar, who had considered Todd his mentor. Shaken, Oscar vows to Tanasha that he won't let her die before him. Later, over tea, Oscar notes that Todd's belongings will go to his relatives and comments that, like him, Tanasha has no heirs. He jokingly brings up marriage, but she immediately shuts him down. When Ars asks what Tanasha dislikes about Oscar, Lazar points to his mocking nature, which Tanasha agrees with. She also notes that their contract still has over 6 months left, hinting that things could change in the future. Elsewhere, a wounded Kagar confronts Meryl, who reveals that his lord had already been killed before she arrived. Then she kills Kagar, putting an end to his sinister plot. A few days later, Tanasha is trapped in a recurring dream. A man calls her Ayati and hints at something extraordinary, promising to wake her when they arrive. She murmurs about being sleepy, and then jerks awake in Pharsis to find Oscar gently rousing her. Apologizing for dozing off, she admits the dream haunts her daily, and it is turning out to be a massive headache for her. The next morning, Oscar buries himself in paperwork at his desk, when Tanasha clumsily spills tea on his shirt. As he changes, Lazar arrives to tell him that King Kevin is summoning him. At the meeting, Kevin and General Al question Tanasha about finding Oscar a wife with high magical resistance. They need someone to counter his curse, a blessing from the Witch of Silence that kills any woman bearing his child. Caught off guard, Oscar demands clarification, but Tanasha calmly suggests Meryl, the maid, whose dormant magical potential could awaken through her bloodline after her ancestor's death. However, she doubts Meryl's resistance is strong enough, frustrating Oscar that no one informed him. Kevin then orders Oscar to spend time with Morel to evaluate the weight of her milk containers, leaving Tanasha visibly conflicted. Later, Oscar questions Merilys at his desk about her sealed magic. She explains that her mother and Master Kumar placed a double-layered seal on her, hinting at the strength of her latent power. Noting Tanasha's week-long absence, Oscar asks Lazar, who has no idea where she is. Meanwhile, at the Azure Tower, Tanasha confides in Lucretia, the Witch of the Forbidden Forest. Lucretia confirms that Morel's high magical resistance makes her a viable candidate, giving Oscar options. Tanasha agrees that more choices benefit him, but her voice tells something else. Sensing the uneasiness, Lucretia asks if she is truly happy, and Tanasha insists she is, retreating to analyze the curse on her own. Just then, her familiar Lathla interrupts them, reporting that Oscar has arrived via a magical circle. He confronts her for avoiding him and urges her to prioritize their bond over work. While studying the curse's intricate layers, Tanasha calls it magnificent, comparing love and hatred to two sides of the same coin. She admits it frightens her, showing a rare moment of vulnerability. Oscar then presses for details, but she sidesteps. Lightening the mood, he grabs her dumper playfully and asks if she'll cook dinner for him someday, and Tanasha agrees with a smile on her face. In Pharsis, Al finds Tanasha and shares what he has uncovered about Morel. She has no connection to General Todd, and her background is strangely empty. Tanasha admits she has her own doubts because when she first arrived in Pharsis, she searched the entire kingdom for women with high magical resistance and found only Lucretia. Because of that, Meryl's sudden appearance feels planned, making Tanasha wonder whether Meryl is targeting her or the entire kingdom. When Al spots Meryl nearby, he quickly pulls Tanasha into a fake kiss to test her reaction. However, neither of them notices Oscar watching. On the other hand, Meryl sees Oscar's furious expression and smirks with satisfaction. Later, Oscar summons Tanasha to his chambers, as he is clearly annoyed with her. He demands to know what she was doing with Al earlier, and Tanasha calmly explains she was finalizing plans, but Oscar doesn't believe her. Instead, he hands her a bracelet infused with Akasha-like abilities that suppress her magic. Accusing her of flirting, Oscar picks her up like a Sigma male, intending to teach her some manners in bed. But just then, Tanasha starts panicking, as the memories from her recurring dream rush back, and she begs him to stop. The moment he sets her down on the bed, her fear explodes into raw magic, shattering furniture and glass around them. Oscar is shocked and tries to soothe her, but Tanasha collapses. Realizing he pushed too far, Oscar apologizes, admitting he only meant to scare her and didn't know she carried such trauma. As she regains her composure, Tanasha blames herself, while Oscar admits he also roughed up Al for the stunt. Amused by this, Tanasha decides she'll heal Al later. Oscar insists she should have told him about Meryl's suspicious behavior sooner, but Tanasha counters that Meryl might be under someone's control and warns that they need more information before acting. Next, Oscar gathers the court and openly declares that he is clapping Tanasha in his bedroom. He rejects every proposed match, dismisses Meryl, and removes her from her position until her background can be properly investigated. Meryl tries to protest, but before anyone can react, the palace's magical barrier suddenly collapses. She begins convulsing, and an unseen force shoots toward Tanasha, injuring her arm. Oscar immediately tears off the bracelet that had been suppressing Tanasha's magic. As she heals herself, she warns him not to come closer, since any of her hormones on him weakens his sausage's protective barrier and puts him in real danger. Dropping her innocent act, Meryl mocks Tanasha for being careless. A wolf-like beast, identical to the one Tanasha fought at the magical lake, materializes beside her. With her arm still weakened, Tanasha now faces both Meryl and the summoned monster. Oscar steps forward with Akasha in hand, insisting that his training has prepared him. In response, Meryl strengthens the wolf with flames. The beast charges, and although Oscar blocks it, the fire still burns him. Thinking quickly, he redirects one of Meryl's flame attacks, turning it back onto the wolf and weakening it. Remembering how Tanasha got injured in her previous battle, Oscar switches Akasha to his left hand and promises to finish the fight. When the wolf clamps down on his sword, he uses the opening to drive Morel's spear straight into its mouth, landing a critical blow. With this, the beast collapses like a Ukrainian soldier. Enraged, Morel summons crystals to amplify her magic, threatening to destroy everything. But Tanasha counters with a complex spell, cloaking the area in darkness. As it clears, Meryl vanishes, and Oscar demands her whereabouts, while Tanasha claims that she let her escape to track her. They soon find Meryl in the royal treasury, rummaging for a chest. Tanasha immediately blocks her, refusing to let her take it, but the desperate Meryl claims it's vital, warning Tanasha of future suffering when she meets the one she's been searching for. Confused, Tanasha grabs her dumpers, but the chest falls, unleashing a radiant red crystal. Merylis, mourning her failure to save Vals, is consumed by the light. Just then, Oscar arrives and asks if she's dead, but Tanasha replies that even though her body remains, her soul is gone. In her chambers, Tanasha rests after making a full recovery, while Oscar sits beside her and reveals that the red crystal they found once belonged to his mother, though its purpose remains a mystery. Using the quiet moment, he brings up his marriage proposal again, clearly wanting a definitive answer, but Tanasha responds with a firm refusal, insisting she will never marry. Frustrated, Oscar calls her clueless as he leans in closer, yet she simply yawns and reminds him how exhausted she is. When he teases her about sleeping together, she immediately boots him out. On the other hand, a settlement burns under the flames set by a group of soldiers. In the center stands Lanak, the king of Kush, watching calmly as the destruction spreads. He remarks that the site reminds him of the dark age into which he was born, and now he plans to conquer one of the four nations. Meanwhile, at the academy, Tanasha works quietly in her chambers. Her familiar appears suddenly, signaling that something dangerous is approaching. She sends the familiar away to rest, deciding to stay vigilant herself. That night, she slips into Oscar's room, and watching him sleep with a hard flagpole, she murmurs that she hates seeing people eliminate each other. She recalls that this is why she isolates herself, to avoid losing control and harming anyone. Then, Tanasha casts a spell over him before quietly leaving. Morning arrives, and Oscar wakes to find red markings all over his body. Confused, he calls for Tanasha, demanding an explanation. She calmly reveals reveals that she broke his old curse and replaced it with a new one, using her own blood as a catalyst. Exhausted, she tries to leave and get some rest, but Oscar grabs her hand, hoping for some frisky action. This makes the witch blush a little, and after letting out a small smile, she vanishes. Later, Oscar sits to work, only to be interrupted by an angry Tanasha. He had invited her to his father's birthday party, but she is clearly not happy about attending. Oscar insists she has responsibilities to fulfill, but before their argument escalates, Lazar arrives with urgent news. Prince Russ from Tyres won't attend because Kushkal forces have attacked their borders, and instead, Princess Cecilia will come. Oscar hesitates, aware that Tyres despises mages and may see this as retaliation, but Tanasha pulls him aside, wanting a private word. She asks if he likes Lark, referring to her dragon. Oscar confirms he does, and to his surprise, Tanasha tells him she wants to transfer ownership of the dragon to him. When he asks why, she says nothing, instead embracing him and declaring that Nark now belongs to him. Oscar kisses her, and for the first time, Tanasha doesn't resist, as she starts dripping gravy. Later, Oscar escorts her to the ballroom for Kevin's celebration. On the way, she warns him that if he tells anyone she is his lover, she'll never forgive him. At the event, he congratulates his father and mingles with the guests, and soon, Princess Cecilia approaches him, confirming that her kingdom was attacked. But she assures Oscar that Tyres will retaliate and asks to speak privately about Kushkal's involvement. Meanwhile, Kevin thanks Tanasha for cleansing Oscar's curse, but she dismisses it, saying she only fulfilled her contract. But her attention shifts when she notices Oscar walking with Cecilia, and the princess gives her a mocking smile. Kevin teases that Cecilia will be a challenge for her, which Tanasha glares at, telling him to stop. Kevin jokingly suggests she should just marry Oscar, and she immediately denies it. Back inside, Cecilia brags about her outfit when Tanasha suddenly appears through a window. Cecilia snaps at her, demanding she leave, but Tanasha insists she needs to speak with Oscar. Cecilia asks who this girl is, and Oscar simply tells her the girl is his side piece. Cecilia smirks, mocking Tanasha for barging in, which makes her furious, and she warns Cecilia to back off. Sensing danger, Cecilia leaves nervously, and Oscar asks Tanasha what she wants. She then steps close and casts a spell on him, explaining how she was supposed to die 400 years ago. But before Oscar can respond, a massive magical gate opens behind them, and Lanok steps through. Tanasha's eyes widen in relief as she runs to him and hugs him, saying she thought he was dead. Lanok holds her calmly, explaining that he has begun the Name Marker, a ritual that destroys cities to expand his territory, and he wants Tanasha to be his queen again. Oscar is horrified to hear this, and when Lanok notices him, he asks who he is. Tanasha quickly explains that Oscar now owns Nark, but Lanok gets annoyed, seeing him as a disgusting beta male. But when Lanok moves to attack, Tanasha warns that he'll have to fight her first. With this, Oscar and Lanok clash briefly to test their powers. He soon realizes he could overpower Tanasha if needed, but refuses to hurt her. Lanok grabs her and begins pulling her away, leaving Oscar helpless and furious. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Oscar works quietly while whispers circulate outside. Everyone knows Tanasha is gone, but no one knows how he feels. Frustrated, Oscar finally storms out, tossing his finished documents at Lazar and declaring he's leaving to pursue her. Lazar panics, warning him that it's dangerous to chase after a girl who looks like an OnlyFans model, but Lucretia arrives to stop him. She sits everyone down and explains that she didn't expect Tanasha to leave, but the moment had come. Oscar demands to know what's happening, and Lucretia tells him she received an invitation from Kushkal, which she refused, unaware that Tanasha accepted. When Oscar asks about the relationship between Tanasha and Lanok, Lucretia reveals that ever since Tanasha became a witch, she has been searching for him. Then she smirks and asks if Oscar is jealous. Clenching his fists, he declares he won't let Tanasha go and will bring her back, even if he must eliminate Lanok. Meanwhile, Lucretia warns everyone nearby to leave, as what she is about to reveal could incite a fight to the death. She tells Oscar that Tanasha's real name is Ladar, the lost princess of an ancient kingdom destroyed 400 years ago. Shocked, Oscar learns that she was royalty, born with extraordinary power to become queen. The king could not rule alone, so Lanok was chosen as her partner, though he was far weaker. The kingdom eventually split into factions supporting either Tanash or Lanok. When the king fell ill, the factions grew violent, and Lanok's faction devised a ritual to strengthen him. At 13, Tanasha was taken to a secluded place. Confused and surrounded by strangers, she was repeatedly clapped by Lanok, who intended to extract her magical power. The mages healed her repeatedly to prevent death, but something went wrong. A darkness erupted from her body, consuming everything. Lanok fled, the kingdom collapsed, and Tanasha survived, but she was immobilized for 3 days in agony. Her magic scattered into 5 legendary legs across the world, and she became a witch, building her tower and continuing her search for Lanok. When Oscar quietly asks what Tanasha thinks of him, Lucretia touches his ear, revealing a defensive magic circle Tanasha secretly placed to weaken his barriers so Lanok wouldn't harm him. She also gave him her dragon as a show of trust. So Oscar breathes deeply and declares that he will defeat Lanok no matter what it takes. Moments later, he visits his father and learns that Kushkal has demanded that all 4 kingdoms surrender. Tyres already sent 10,000 soldiers, but they were wiped out, while Kushkal lost only 50 mages. Entire cities vanished, and Tanash was responsible for the destruction. Kevin tells Oscar that the kingdoms want him to fight because only he can defeat Kushkal. Oscar agrees to join the battle, but refuses to eliminate Tanasha unless she becomes a true enemy. However, Kevin grows furious, asking if the witch has manipulated him with her milk containers, but Oscar stands firm. So Kevin tells him it is time to inherit the throne, and Oscar steps up for the job. In the Tayari kingdom, Prince Rost stands deep in thought, realizing that another attack on the Coup Skull might be inevitable. At that moment, Nasha appears, warning him that he must wait 2 weeks before the situation reaches its conclusion. Ross struggles to comprehend what is unfolding and summons the small mage, but Nasha interrupts, pointing out that he truly does not understand the circumstances. She explains that if he had not underestimated the mages, his kingdom would not be in such dire condition. As she speaks, she emphasizes that the mages are systematically destroying the world's order, created by the true god. She asks if Rost has ever witnessed the destruction of an infant's skull, or a mother's grief as her child burns, confronting him with the harsh reality of his kingdom's actions. Taken aback, Ross listens as Nasha stresses that even after 300 years, darkness has not ended, and humanity still needs to adapt robot girlfriends. As she departs, Rost stops her, and Tinashe turns to face him. Meanwhile, in Caskel, Lana discovers that the 4 great nations are uniting to attack them. He creates a tactical map, planning the kingdom's defenses and instructing his allies on deployment. When questions arise about whether a magical spell can fully protect them, Lana assures them that Nasha's power is strong enough to cover the entire area. As he contemplates the situation, he doubts whether the events are real or a dream. But Tinashe reassures him that it is indeed reality, and Lana promises to protect Nasha. Walking alongside a man named Rana, Tinashe explains why witches are exclusively women, revealing that women can control magical power more effortlessly due to their magical composition, whereas men cannot maintain such control due to their throbbing sausages. She then vows to spread magical power along the main line to ensure their plan's success, unaware that someone is observing from below. In the Phasis Kingdom, Oscar sits with his subordinates, pondering why Prince Ravan has not yet summoned them, while Pascal attacks other nations. News arrives that the Coup Skull has destroyed cities across the 4 nations, and Oscar begins to suspect Tinashe is behind it. An advisor warns that if Tinashe does not intervene, they could face severe difficulties. Suddenly, Sylvia enters, drawing everyone's attention. She reports that she discovered a girl resembling someone Oscar knows in his brother's room. Guided by Oscar, she reveals the room's location, and they proceed to Reynolds' chambers. Reynolds questions their presence, and Oscar explains that they discovered Nasha's role in preventing attacks. When Nasha arrives, Rena orders the others to leave while Tinashe watches in surprise. Guards escort Tinashe away, leaving Oscar and Nasha to prepare for what comes next. The following day, the council reflects on the time wasted due to Rena, noting that the critical period will pass quickly. Luck Reggie reports that she has inspected the towns attacked by Tinashe and confirms that all inhabitants are alive, with barriers protecting them. Oscar is relieved but is warned that Nasha does not protect herself, so a shield must remain. Oscar communicates these updates to Tayari Kingdom's generals, who accept the information. At that moment, Chief Mang Bard from Koskel arrives, and while the generals prepare to attack, he assures them that he comes in peace. He explains that their presence is meant to demonstrate his kingdom's dominance, though the gods question his motives due to his history as a convicted Drake fan. However, Oscar resolves to observe for himself, and Badalis confirms he will accompany him, taking his men along. When Oscar opens his eyes, he finds himself surrounded by fallen comrades and mages from Kel, realizing he has walked into a trap. Just then, Lanak appears, drawing his sword and welcoming him to Lidar's Rion. As Lanak descends, he suggests their fight should end, remarking that the world is filled with excessive conflict and declaring his intent to deliver divine punishment to those who act like gooners. Oscar questions whether Lanak seeks godhood, and Lanak announces his desire to introduce him to his bride, summoning Tinashe. Seeing Oscar, Tinashe questions the scene, and Lanak explains that he wanted others to witness their movement, creating a controlled environment for observation. Nasha agrees and positions herself, allowing Lanak to place his hand upon her as their magical powers begin to connect. Lanak channels his power into the sky, linking the 5 magical lakes and attempting to synchronize their energy. These lakes contain immense power, granting Lanak oversight of the main line. Meanwhile, Oscar searches for an opening to attack, but none presents itself. Eventually, the lakes fully connect, and Lanak moves to take complete control. Tinashe intervenes, removing the magical power from Lanak and redirecting it onto Oscar. She silently channels the energy, preparing to liberate captured souls, explaining that only she can complete the task and free the spirits held in the lakes by the previous magic. Meanwhile, Lanak prepares to attack, but Tinashe neutralizes his limpy sausage, and he instructs others to strike her. The mages surround her, yet the 2 men guarding Nasha create protective barriers while Nasha shields them and deflects attacks. She instructs her guards to retreat, but they insist on staying, anticipating her defense. A second magical attack targets the group, which Tinashe blocks while Oscar destroys the enemy attack. Nasha requests 10 minutes to complete her work, and later, Oscar expresses curiosity about the current state of Acacia, neutralizing threats as they arise. Lanak summons demons, and a fierce battle ensues as the mages call forth devils to strike their enemies. Amid the chaos, the Tayari Kingdom's king witnesses a child's anger stemming from his sister's death, realizing the gravity of their prior mistakes. Just then, Medina intervenes, rendering the boy unconscious like a sack of potatoes. Nasha employs double magic, astonishing onlookers, while Tinashe uses magical summoning to control 12 demons simultaneously. As the confrontation escalates, Oscar reassures allies that he will destroy threats before they can act. He fends off attacks from Badalis, emerging unscathed and eliminating his opponent. Nasha completes her magical incarnation, summoning all 12 spirits and fully engaging in combat, while Tinashe directs attacks, eliminating spirits, demons, and mages. All supernatural forces vanish upon destruction. Lanak attempts to flee but pauses to face Oscar's Digbeak energy. They confront each other and Oscar seeks answers. Lanak allows him to ask anything, revealing that he used a tool in the past. Enraged by the truth, Oscar attacks with his weapon. Meanwhile, Nasha successfully liberates all trapped souls. Amid the aftermath, Tinashe faints from exhaustion. Upon awakening in bed, she realizes she has slept for an entire week. Oscar informs her that Roth's lecture restored his sanity and that the Ku Skull remains inactive, now declared an independent mage nation. He also announces that from this day forward, Tinashe is officially his main piece. Nasha reacts, recalling her prior vow never to marry, but Oscar explains that his decision was intended to protect her and utilize her power, ensuring safety for the coming half year. With this arrangement, Tinashe accepts the deal with a happy heart. Later, Tinashe leads everyone into the Tuldar treasury, telling them to take whatever they need and report back later. While others search, she notices a box containing a blue crystal that looks a lot like crystal meth. Something about it feels familiar, so she decides to take it to Pharsis. At Madgard Fortress in eastern Pharsis, Oscar checks with a general about the area. The general assures him that everything is mostly fine, though minor conflicts remain. Tinashe notices children playing below, and the general explains that a year ago, horsemen attacked the town, killing many before soldiers could arrive. Among the refugees is a girl named Els, who survived thanks to a mysterious man in blue clothes and a girthy flagpole who saved her life. Els now entertains the village children with stories from long ago. She recounts how centuries earlier her town was attacked, but a stranger in blue saved a girl from death and vanished afterward. Tinashe realizes the man might have come from the future to protect Els' mother. Els confirms the story, saying it happened 200 years ago and that the man was the son of the girl he saved. Hearing this, Tinashe and Oscar ponder the implications of a time-traveling protector. Back in Oscar's quarters, Nasha appears in cat form, explaining she must stay that way to keep watch. Oscar questions her trust and Nasha climbs onto his sausage, clarifying it's not about distrust. That night, they encounter a seriously injured person. Nasha explains she merged with others due to a sleep magic broadcast, sinking her energy unintentionally. Oscar struggles to understand, but Tinashe confirms magical interference. Morning brings the team to a desert-like area to survey villages. They spot armed figures aiming arrows at them. Nasha becomes agitated, but Oscar calms her, identifying them as enemies. A leader named Javi demands a girl they failed to protect a year ago, signaling a duel. With this, Oscar and Tinashe realize the area resembles a training ground. On the other hand, Els recognizes Javi as the one who unalived her husband. The duel begins, and Oscar and Javi match evenly. Oscar disarms Javi immediately, reminding him of the consequences if he attacks again. During the duel, a tornado forms around Els and Javi, its chaotic magic threatening everyone. Just then, Nasha teleports the team out while Oscar notices the ground cracking beneath them like a dried-up poo-poo. Suddenly, Tinashe falls, but Oscar catches her along with Nasha, landing in the water safely. Nasha explains that cat form prevents her from controlling certain energies, forcing her to revert to human form. They continue exploring, discovering murals of a god who once defeated a devil among humans. Nasha identifies the devil as an ancient mage revered due to the reactions of magical energy. When Oscar wonders why the magic reacts so strongly, Nasha explains the figure might have been a Nirdi deity, respected by the Tahiri people. Black smoke fills the underground as they advance, so Tinashe creates a protective barrier. When they confront Els, holding a sword infused with black smoke, Oscar blocks her attack, realizing Tinashe has controlled the magical interference. However, Els absorbs the smoke herself, demonstrating her power, and Oscar retreats to protect his meat grinder. Nasha absorbs the remaining black smoke into her body, warning that it could escape. She then points to her stomach, indicating some form of containment, so Oscar attacks carefully to avoid harming her, while assisting Tinashe in harnessing her magic. However, Nasha reassures him that she will sense any threat before it causes harm. They then plan to find Akashia's sword, the only viable path to victory. Tinashe warns that attacking could risk collateral damage, but leaving the enemy unchecked is not an option. Just then, Javi reappears, determined to stop them. Nasha explains that allowing Javi free control would lead to uncontrollable magic and innocent deaths. Realizing this chick is correct, Oscar immediately prepares for confrontation. Just then, Tinashe kisses Oscar, hoping to get clapped that night. However, Oscar notes that the enemy already knows about Akashia's sword and suggests they move immediately. So, Tinashe releases her magic and draws attention to herself. In the meantime, Javi attempts to capture Els, who fights back but is restrained. Black smoke from Nasha disperses, absorbed into her body, demonstrating her immense control. But Oscar manages to protect Tinashe and coordinates attacks to avoid harming Nasha. A few moments later, Tinashe collapses from exertion, and Oscar checks her. Nasha reassures them she is fine and prepared for threats, so Tinashe rests, trusting Oscar to protect her. He then reassures his chick and kisses her juicy face. Seeing this, Nasha gets embarrassed and tells him that it wasn't necessary, but Oscar laughs, admitting he couldn't control his ding-dong. On the other hand, Lucretia has learned that Nasha had absorbed Ri into her body, after which Oscar eliminated him. Though she feels deep regret about the situation, Nasha reassures her, saying she fully trusts Oscar. Lucretia accepts this but asks what Nasha plans to do next, as her one-year contract is about to end. But Nasha remains silent, prompting Lucretia to warn her not to do anything she might later regret. Outside, two men discuss how the past year passed quickly, and how they managed it easily. One urges the other to get married soon and clap his wife, and the second agrees. Just then, Norman arrives and voices his opposition, warning that marrying Nasha, a witch, could endanger the nation. Tinashe has been overhearing this from a distance, and she steps forward, advising that if Oscar truly cares for her, he shouldn't marry someone else. She also notes Norman's contract is expiring soon and tells him to pack up and leave. Later, Tinashe tells Nasha not to worry, and that before leaving, she might erase Oscar's memory of her. Two men standing nearby warn that she cannot do this. Nasha admits that if she does erase his memory, Oscar will be angry, so she must think carefully. Standing beside Nasha, Pamra is visibly upset, but Nasha calms her, reminding her that witches are widely hated because of their juicy juggernauts, and that they are allies. At night, Nasha and Pamra sit outside, and Pamra questions Nasha's plan to erase Oscar's memory. Nasha thinks about it for a while and reassures her that at least she can remember him. She adds that Oscar is strong and can take care of himself, and she still doesn't understand why she is alive. Hearing this, the family is angry, warning Nasha to live like humans if she does not want to die so soon. Suddenly, Tinashe rises, hugs Pamra, and promises to take care of herself. Later, Tinashe enters Oscar's room and he immediately notices her somber mood. She sits beside him and shows a photo she captured of the outside view through a crystal. Oscar takes the crystal and places it on the table. Concerned, he asks why she seems sad. Nasha is about to use some magic, but Oscar stops her and asks what kind of magic she was going to use. Surprised by his quick reaction, she explains it was only a psychological trick to make him reveal his ding-dong. Oscar warns her to ask him first next time, and when he asks why she is sad, Nasha says she is thinking about the past. Without hesitation, Oscar urges her to marry him outright, but Nasha refuses, and he explains that marrying him and ending her contract would allow her to restart her aging and spend the rest of her life with him. Suddenly, Tinashe and Oscar engage in a heartfelt kiss. She does not resist, though Nasha tells her to stop such actions. Oscar suggests that if she doesn't want to do this, she could betray him. Tinashe admits she is unsure but cannot refuse him because he is special to her, prompting Oscar to hug her. Seeing this, Nasha confesses she feels they should not be together, and Oscar tells her she should find the answer herself. Suddenly, someone bangs at the door. When Oscar opens it angrily, he warns Lazar that it would be better if he were eliminated. Shocked by this reaction, Lazar demands an explanation. Just then, Nasha notices something outside and calls Oscar to check. She discovers part of the house has fallen and alerts him that the kingdom's magical barrier has been destroyed. In just a few moments, demons begin to attack. Marina tries to fight them with weapons, and Norman comes to see the situation, but is attacked by a demon. Nasha helps him and tells him to retreat inside while they handle the demons. Norman urges Tinashe to protect Oscar, while Nasha calls upon the people summoned during the previous magical defense and orders them to fight the demons like a bunch of mindless dorks. Meanwhile, Tinashe uses magic to create protective rain, just when Oscar notices a girl in trouble. He immediately rushes to help, but the girl grabs his hand, causing him to feel pain and lose consciousness. Moments later, when Tinashe finds him unconscious, she discovers a needle in his hand and attempts to heal him. Immediately, Tinashe brings Oscar to her room, where Lucretia and others are present. Lucretia notices Oscar's hand has poison and questions if it is Akakia's. Nasha confirms it is deadly, stating that those poisoned by the Dark Ages never survive. She promises to create a serum using her own filthy bodily fluids, but Lucretia warns it will cause Nasha great pain. But even after the restriction, Nasha insists on doing it and asks for their help. Lucretia, seeing no other option, agrees, and both girls assist Nasha. They begins with the procedure as Lucretia starts her magical process. When Oscar regains consciousness, he is confused by his blurred perceptions. Lazar explains he had been unconscious for some time and they were worried. Suddenly, Oscar experiences sharp pain and realizes he feels as if he is forgetting everything. Lazar suggests he might have had a dream and offers food, but Oscar declines, saying he needs some fresh milk containers. Everyone leaves in contempt, but Oscar notices a crystal on his table given by Nasha. Just when Naman passes by, Oscar asks him what happened before he fainted. Naman hesitates, and Oscar dismisses it, but Naman asks if Oscar has decided who his future queen will be. Without a second thought, the simp thinks of Tinashe. Later, Oscar tries to reach Nasha's room, but finds a wall blocking his path. His hand passes through the wall, and he enters to hear Lucretia's voice. She asks how he is there since his memory was altered and reminds him that no one should reveal Tinashe's existence to him. Oscar inquires about her location, and Lucretia brings him to Tinashe, sitting on the bed. She explains that Oscar was poisoned due to Tinashe, and Oscar asks if Nasha is alive. Lucretia confirms it. Shocked by the pain Nasha endured, Oscar apologizes, acknowledging his role in it. On top of that, Nasha's body bears red marks from the poison, and Oscar hugs her, hoping to console her throbbing jugs. The next morning, Tinashe wakes up and sees Lucretia. Surprised she survived, Lucretia tells her to sit, and she heals Tinashe's wound. Just then, Oscar enters his study and notices Tinashe there. Seeing Nasha, he asks if she is fully healed. Nasha confirms she is fine, so he asks her to reveal her skin to confirm her recovery. Tinashe remarks she cannot understand his mind, but Oscar asks Nasha if he is important to her or just a contract holder. Nasha affirms he is genuinely important to her, and Oscar laughs like an idiot. Later, Tinashe tells everyone that Oscar laughed. Dawn asks Nasha if she would help anyone else in distress like Oscar, and Nasha says it depends on circumstances, admitting she is truly emotionally attached to him. Just then, Dawn comments on her sexual attraction toward Oscar, which Nasha denies, but everyone affirms that she wants to jump on his sausage. Realizing she indeed loves Oscar, Nasha decides to finalize her feelings. Meanwhile, Oscar contemplates the crystal, and when Tinashe approaches, she claims that she realized she truly loves him after gathering opinions from everyone. So, Oscar calls Tinashe close, and Nasha hugs him while crying. She expresses her relief at meeting him, and Oscar replies that it was wonderful for him too. A few days later, Tinashe and Oscar are lying together on the bed, still recovering from the recent chaos. Slowly, Tinashe sits up and attempts to use her magic, but her body struggles to respond. Watching her, Oscar asks when they will finally proceed with their penetration activity, and Tanasha reassures him that she is ready to become his fiancée. However, Oscar reminds her that he did not bring her here just to hide her from the world. Later, as Oscar works, Tina stands by his side while he explains that the New Year festival is approaching and that preparations across the kingdom are already underway. Their conversation is interrupted when Latola arrives, informing Tina that some children from the Farsa's kingdom have come to the witch tower. Outside the tower, a group of children tries to slip inside quietly, but Tanasha appears behind them, asking what they are doing there. The kids freeze at the sight of her. One of them, Sai, explains that strange ice has been falling in their kingdom instead of rain. Tanasha immediately recalls a similar occurrence from the past and realizes they are referring to the same phenomenon. She asks why they came all the way here just to report it, and they admit they traveled without adult supervision, unaware of the dangers. So Tanasha decides to take them back and creates a portal. Nervously, the little gooners ask if she is a witch, and she simply replies, "Shut your trap." Back inside, Tanasha tells Oscar that installing surveillance around the tower was the right choice, as it allows them to detect suspicious magical activity at any time. Oscar then asks why she keeps avoiding the topic of marriage. Finally, Tanasha explains that Oscar's body contains an abnormally high amount of magical power, which could pose a problem if they ever have a child. She warns that a daughter would be a witch from birth and immediately targeted, while a son might be forced to use celestial swords or turn into an alphabet. She suspects that Oscar's father was aware of this and gave him the celestial sword for the same reason. Oscar is shocked to hear this, but Tanasha clarifies that she believes the warning came from his mother or someone close to her. Oscar insists that Tanasha should not fear his power. She then climbs onto his sausage, reminding him that their magic has saved countless lives, but it is also true that it has also taken many. Oscar responds that he has done the same, yet their child deserves guidance rather than rejection before birth. Soon, the New Year festival begins. Oscar arrives on horseback with his companions, and Sai, the boy Tanasha saved earlier, notices her and tries awkwardly to avoid her. At the festival grounds, Oscar and the others drink together, but he senses something suspicious. Immediately, Tanasha uses her magic to track the presence. A guard approaches, and Tanasha tells him someone was watching them but has escaped. She then senses another presence, calling out Sai's name. Sai slowly steps out and apologizes, saying he was only curious. The other children also appear, and Tanasha tells them to come with her as they travel toward the Farsa's kingdom. On the road, heavy rain begins to pour, but Tanasha transforms the raindrops into snow. Sai proudly points out that he mentioned this earlier, and Oscar watches the snowfall, finally understanding what the little gooners had meant. After reaching the kingdom, Oscar says goodbye as Tanasha, exhausted, falls asleep, prompting him to carry her inside. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Leonora, a powerful witch. A spy reports that Tanasha's magic seems weaker, and Leonora calmly instructs him to eliminate the witch if he gets the chance. The next day, Oscar prepares for work, and Talora reminds him that he must attend the Gandor Foundation event. Though he complains, he eventually agrees, noting he isn't worried about protection because Tanasha will accompany him. They plan to bring Pamara and Sylvia as well, but Tanasha insists she can dress herself, so Oscar asks her to inform him of her location during the event so he can find her easily. At the crowded celebration, Tanasha stands quietly in the hall until a man named Travish approaches. A high-ranking demon, nearly equivalent to demon royalty, invites her to dance and get clapped, but she refuses. He comments that she looks weak, and she replies that she is injured. Spotting Oscar below, Travish remarks that he does not understand why Tanasha wants to marry him and adds that if Oscar were a girl, he might have considered her himself. Tanasha finds this unsettling and asks why Travish is even here. He reveals that he is the Duke of the Kingdom and, noticing Oscar, remarks that she looks vulnerable and could be easily harmed. However, Tanasha boldly warns him to try if he dares. Before tensions escalate, Relaya, a member of the Gandor royal family, arrives and scolds Travish for being a creepy P. Diddy. She introduces herself and recognizes Tanasha as Oscar's fiancée. Travish jokes about wanting to see their future child, making Tanasha uncomfortable. But Relaya explains that children can be good or bad, but parents must care for them regardless, and she quickly apologizes after realizing she may have said too much. Tanasha finds her strange, but Travish reassures her that Relaya will not take offense. Later, Oscar relaxes in a bath while Tanasha pours water for him. He explains that the Princess of Yard Kingdom was kidnapped before her arrival, and no one has found her since. Tanasha suggests using surveillance magic, but Oscar prefers to wait. Pulling her into the water, he mentions he saw her speaking with Travish. Tanasha then warns him to stay cautious because Travish is a higher demon, nearly a demon king, who seemed particularly interested in Oscar. That night, Oscar hears noises outside, and it turns out that demons are attacking the kingdom, and he tries to fight them. Soon after, Tanasha arrives and destroys them effortlessly. Oscar realizes she is not wearing proper clothing, and before he can speak, she senses something and runs off. She then chases a suspicious girl, traps her with magic, and demands an explanation. However, the girl claims she is following orders from her master but does not know their name. Just as Tanasha prepares to act, a man appears, grabs the girl, and disappears into thin air, leaving Tanasha confused about what just happened. Moments later, Travish arrives, explaining that the man intended to unalive Relaya. While speaking, he notices Tanasha's gigantic knocker boots and comments on her attire. At this point, Tanasha realizes what she is wearing and panics, knowing Oscar will be furious. The next day, Oscar receives a report that the Prime Minister of Gandor has been eliminated, along with many casualties. Some officials suspect Tanasha, prompting Oscar to scold her for acting alone, but Tanasha apologizes and explains that she knows who is behind it. Leonora, a witch who cannot be summoned or traced. Oscar is shocked to hear this, and Tanasha elaborates that Leonora frequently interferes through shadow magic and is close to the Prince of Yard Kingdom, whose princess recently disappeared. She also reveals that Leonora once turned an entire kingdom into amber. Realizing that Leonora may target either them or Yard Kingdom next, Oscar and Tanasha prepare to investigate, hoping that the missing princess holds the answers. Following day, a group is stationed in the western region, observing a massive sunstorm. Oscar informs everyone that the princess is trapped within it, prompting them to move quickly toward the fortress where she is held. Upon arriving, Oscar introduces himself and apologizes for coming without permission. However, the princess, Nephilia, politely reassures him that it's fine since she likes men with hairy flagpoles. The group soon learns that a witch orchestrated Nephilia's abduction, which shocks everyone. Nephilia asks why they are involved, and Nasha explains that the witch is uncontrollable and strikes unexpectedly, often targeting kingdoms without warning. Tanasha adds that she accompanied Yard, which initially angers Oscar, but Nasha clarifies that without their intervention, the kingdom would have been destroyed. Oscar asks why Nasha made the decision to act, and she explains that she teleported to the fortress, evacuated the ministers, and neutralized the king, who had been poisoned. Nephilia mentions that she also spoke with her brother, who regretted summoning Lenore, leading them to plan to summon Lenore here for a direct confrontation. As night falls, Nasha communicates with a spirit for guidance. Oscar inquires about her previous fight with the demon Nar, and she confirms her victory. She instructs Oscar to monitor a powerful man linked to Lenore, who has absorbed demon energy and increased his strength. Oscar agrees, promising to support Nasha so she does not have to handle everything alone, while Nasha insists that anyone opposing them will not be spared. By morning, Nasha has successfully neutralized the powerful man, impressing everyone. Lenore acknowledges her skill and instructs her to prepare for the next mission. As Nasha briefly steps aside, Para notices marks on her and questions whether she is manipulating Oscar. Nasha admits some influence over him, but stresses it is for protection, not harm. When Para asks whether she wants full control, Tanasha reflects that sometimes manipulation is necessary to prevent greater danger. Nasha recalls meeting Lenore as a child when Lenore advised her to embrace her power instead of hiding it. That advice shaped her perspective and motivated her to act as a protector of the kingdom. As she prepares to venture out, she sees Mustar active outside. Tanasha also arrives, tying a ribbon, explaining it will alert him to danger and allow him to sense her presence. Observing this, Nasha expresses her desire to marry Tanasha once the mission concludes, and Tanasha agrees, surprising this limp sausage wielder, Oscar. Meanwhile, the battlefield is already active. Tanasha attacks Lenore, but her initial strikes have little effect, forcing her to strategize and use greater force. Below, Yana attempts to strike Oscar, but he counters skillfully. Nasha launches her own magical attacks, targeting multiple enemies and neutralizing them efficiently. The enemies struggle to respond as Nasha and Oscar coordinate seamlessly. A sunstorm begins forming again. Inside, Nasha observes red butterflies emerging, revealing the presence of the Ember Crystal, which has the power to imprison humans. Alarmed, she prepares to confront the threat, but Lenore launches a massive attack, which Nasha blocks and counters with her own magic. Oscar soon joins her, protecting allies and ensuring they can withstand Lenore's offensive. Together, Nasha and Oscar prevent the enemy from gaining the upper hand. Using strategic position switching, Nasha confuses the opponents and continues to block and counter attacks from multiple directions, displaying remarkable skill and synergy. Despite the enemy's efforts, they are completely overwhelmed. Nasha destroys critical battlefield devices while Oscar prevents reinforcements from assisting. During the fight, one of the enemy's hands is revealed to be demonic, highlighting the true danger. Moments later, Nasha creates another sunstorm to disrupt the battlefield, causing it to break apart. From within, a stone emerges, and countless red butterflies confirm the presence of the Amber Crystal, capable of trapping humans. Nasha's quick thinking allows her to mitigate the crystal's power while continuing the fight. Oscar notices the intensity of the battle and assists Nasha, ensuring she is not overpowered. So Lenore launches a significant attack which Nasha deflects, before striking Yana and forcing her back. Oscar also joins in, neutralizing another enemy. With this, Nasha uses wires and magical strikes to control the battlefield, inflicting damage while healing herself to remain effective. She then summons massive amounts of snow to counter attacks aimed at Lenore, preventing her from regaining control. Lenore attempts to use her magic on Nasha, but coordinated defenses and counterattacks prevent her from succeeding. Oscar then intercepts the remaining threats, and gradually Nasha and Oscar gain the upper hand. The Amber Crystal's power diminishes, and the demonic presence begins to vanish like a fart in the wind. With the threat neutralized, the kingdom begins to stabilize. Tanasha and Oscar witness the aftermath as enemies are defeated, and the Amber Crystal's influence disappears. Just then, Travis appears, commending Nasha for fulfilling her promise and assuring her that as long as the kingdom's bloodline remains intact, he will not interfere with her milk containers. Tanasha affirms her commitment to live with Oscar and face future challenges together. A few days later, preparations for Tanasha and Oscar's wedding begins. Nasha appears in a white dress with Sai following, pledging to protect her and vowing to become a soldier when he grows up. Friends and allies celebrate the union. However, Nasha notices Lenia, the Witch of Silence, observing the ceremony and wonders if she intends harm. though Lenia only wishes to see who Nasha is marrying. The wedding proceeds without interruption. Tanasha and Oscar shares their vow and share a spicy kiss, symbolizing their union. Nasha admits she did not expect her feelings to change so profoundly, but is now happy to marry this ancient broad. The celebration continues, with everyone rejoicing in their happiness. A few days later, Oscar is seen helping Nasha in her tower when he notices a box stained with blood. Curious by this sight, he opens it to find a pendant inside, while another box falls nearby, revealing a blue crystal. But as soon as Oscar touches it, a radiant light emanates from the crystal, catching his attention. Tanasha soon arrives, rushing forward to assist, but before she can act, Oscar suddenly disappears like Jeffrey Epstein. Disoriented, he finds himself unsure of his location. Meanwhile, a younger Tanasha is startled when Oscar appears and she immediately attacks him. He manages to block her strike calmly and asks her to cool down, explaining that he wants to talk. Observing the tension, Nasha intervenes, allowing Oscar to introduce himself as her future husband. Shocked to hear this, Nasha questions his sanity, but Tanasha notes that he seems as confused as she is. Oscar then reveals that he has traveled 400 years into the past, astonishing Tanasha. She then insists that no magic can allow time travel. Yet Oscar explains that his knowledge of future events makes him believe he might be dreaming and asks her to wake him. When Tanasha asks why he needs her help, Oscar admits that only her milk containers can assist him. She refuses at first, claiming time travel is impossible. However, he explains that she had been placed in a magical slumber for 400 years to keep her safe, but her body cannot endure that long. When Oscar asks if there is another way, Nasha interjects saying no alternative exists, but he may stay temporarily as no one visits her during this period. Oscar is surprised to hear this information, but he is oddly grateful. They then discuss her age, and Tanasha reveals she is 13, the age she is destined to die and become a witch. Oscar realizes the gravity of the situation, but keeps it to himself, instructing her to sleep peacefully. So Tanasha lies down on the bed, and Oscar bids her goodnight. The next morning, Oscar and Tanasha have tea together. He compliments her tea, surprising her, and asks when her next birthday is. Tanasha replies that it is 6 months away, making him contemplate that staying in this timeline might allow him to save her from her fate. Oscar begins extensive research to identify which magic brought him to the past, but finds nothing conclusive. Seeing this, Tanasha notices and inquires about a short he wears that seems immune to magic. Oscar explains that the shorts prevent spells from affecting him, so Tanasha deduces that only a royal sorcerer could create such protection, confirming his royal connection. She then tries to use magic on him, but it is immediately dispelled. Oscar then recalls seeing the crystal in the treasury of Fasters and realizes it was stored with the royal treasures. He experiences a headache and tells Tanasha that he might not meet her under normal circumstances because the crystal originally belonged to his mother. He recalls it appeared blue when kept in Taldar's treasury. Tanasha doubts anyone could access it now and admits she doesn't fully trust his dorky predictions. But Oscar apologizes for rushing her and promises caution. Meanwhile, Tanasha notices a powerful blessing within Oscar. He explains he received it in childhood and used a curse to cancel its effects. Intrigued, Tanasha requests a blood sample for analysis. Oscar agrees, but asks in return that she practice her magic shorts with him, preparing her for the future. They spend time training, after which Tanasha examines his bodily fluids. During this period, Tanasha grows attached to a dragon, which Oscar recognizes as the same dragon she once gifted him. She mentions that Lank is likely waiting for her, unsettling Oscar. Tanasha then meets Lank, who gives her the pendant and says he cannot stay long. Tanasha questions Lank, but he insists he must leave. Later, Oscar inspects the pendant and asks about its origin. Tanasha explains that Lank brought it from the treasury, but Oscar warns her not to trust him. This angers Tanasha deeply, who defends her friend, insisting Oscar has no right to question him. On top of that, Tanasha gets frustrated at being unable to remain with her family and becomes emotional. But Oscar comforts her, assuring her that she will not be alone in the future. That night, Tanasha sleeps while Oscar watches over her juicy knocker boots. The next morning, Tanasha awakens to find him reading a book and apologizes for her behavior the previous night. Oscar accepts it like a simp and thanks her for checking the treasury for the crystal. Tanasha explains she found the blue crystal but could not retrieve it and installed tampering magic to disable surveillance for an hour, allowing Oscar to act. At night, Oscar prepares to retrieve the blue crystal. Tanasha asks if he is truly destined to be her husband in the future. He confirms that this will happen 400 years later and instructs her to avoid Lank, warning that he is dangerous. Tanasha is uneasy about Oscar's departure, but when she hears someone outside, she assumes it is him, only to find Lank. Meanwhile, Oscar reaches the blue crystal, conflicted about why he is there and how he arrived. As he cautiously examines it, Lank brings Tanasha to a location intending to harm her. As Lank prepares to attack, Oscar intervenes at the last moment. Surprised, Tanasha asks why he is here, and Lank commands his forces to attack. But Nasha uses magical barriers to protect herself. Simultaneously, Oscar destroys the impending attack and manages to defend them both. At this point, Tanasha realizes Oscar and Nasha have pushed themselves too far, and retrieves both the crystal and the pendant, warning that she is ready to fight if anyone intends to harm her. Lank instructs his minions to cast spells and attempts to use sun magic to increase his power. However, it backfires and he collapses, leaving the sun magic dangerously unstable. Tanasha recognizes that if left unchecked, It could destroy Taldar. Oscar encourages her, expressing his trust that she can control the magic. Initially reluctant, she is convinced by his confidence and told to protect Taldar at all costs while he remains by her side. Nasha absorbs the residual magic and soon loses consciousness from the strain. Upon awakening, she sees Oscar and realizes the danger has been neutralized. Oscar praises her efforts and kisses her like P. Diddy's toxic cousin, apologizing for previously deceiving her and explains that future circumstances may prevent them from meeting again, but he has helped her now. Finally, Tanasha asks why he cannot stay in the future, and Oscar recounts the story of a legendary man who saved his mother in the past but vanished because altering the past changes the future. Understanding the consequences, Nasha is devastated and begins to cry. However, Oscar consoles her, assuring her that she will become a great queen, and that even if they cannot meet again, he truly loves her. He then asks her to close her eyes, promising he will disappear. Tanasha begs him not to vanish, but when she opens her eyes, Oscar's gone, leaving her unsure of what to do. In the future, Tanasha has grown into the ruler of Taldar, who is poised as a powerful queen, completely aware of the sacrifices and trials that shaped her journey. If you watch this anime recap until the end, comment down magic jugs. If you like anime recaps like this, watch this video.